All right, Ross, let's get to it here. I was discussing with you, or I was going to bring up with you, the color of law. In the course of conversations with you and Rick, comments are made, or quotes are made, or references are made, and this one just hit me. It was color of law. And then I started looking it up. I go, oh, that's what that kind of means, I think. And I wanted to explain it. So I wanted to ask you, Ross, to talk about the color of law. What does it mean? How does it apply? Who does it favor? What's its legal ramifications? And then I've got some examples of what might be it, or you've got something there as well. So go ahead.
Well, Thomas Paine said in Common Sense many, many, many years ago, okay, that society in every state is a blessing, but government, right, in every sense of the word, is nothing more than a necessary evil.
That's right.
Okay, and the reason that he said that is because society, right, makes us advance. We exchange ideas. We exercise our rights. We do things to interact and communicate with each other. We try to sell products, exchange items and ideas. Okay, and so it's built to the more positive things, unless you're reading social media, right? But whereas government then is going to be based on our wickedness, our evils, because it's going to try to restrict exercise of certain rights to do things and not do things, because, right, it doesn't want us to intrude on the rights of other people. And so that's why we've got to be careful that we don't allow government to, right, overly expand itself to regulate more or do more than what we've authorized it to do, because it is that necessary evil, and it will chill, right, the exercise of our constitutional rights that we do have. Remember, those rights that are inherent by God, that are given to us, ordained by God, natural to man.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the freedoms and liberties that we have, we don't want government to step in and restrict us too much. We just only want it to restrict enough to where we have a good life, where we can have the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, and so with that in mind, your color of law is essentially going to mean that an officer, an official, or somebody that is classified as a state actor, okay, has exceeded their authority. Okay, they're purporting to act, right? They're alleging that they act, right, pursuant to their job duties, their official duties, some statute, some governmental custom or practice or policy, but in fact, they're going beyond what we've ordained government to regulate. Okay, what we've restricted government in its class, in its fields of regulation, they're going beyond those fields of regulation into an area that they're not supposed to regulate. And so, really, color of law doesn't necessarily mean that it is not necessarily negative. You can act under color of law and actually be authorized. But in the context that I'm talking about, when we're saying that somebody's acting under color of law when they're really not, they're exceeding the bounds of their authority.
In the way you're referencing it, is it the person in that position of power taking advantage of one's ignorance and having a power trip, or is it the person who's in the position of power is ignorant themselves to what they're doing, or do you think it's a combination of the two?
It's going to be the first. It's going to be the state actor. Really, what the victim, so to speak, thinks about the person's authority. For the most part, I'm sure there's exceptions to that rule, but you're almost never going to look to what that person thinks. The person whose rights are being restricted. You don't care about what that person thinks. You're looking at the actions of the official, okay, of the person that's claiming the authority. But I don't want you to think that this only applies to, like, let's say, police officers and stuff like that. So
Could be school teachers, right?
it could be, we're talking nursing homes, hospitals, jails, teachers, like you said, judges, sheriffs, absolutely police officers. But you're talking about debt collectors. Even debt collectors can be, right, giving false information to a debtor, trying to tell them that, or they could send them some kind of letter that looks like some kind of county or document. How many times do you get those calls saying this is the IRS, right? You've been audited and we're about to file suit against you, right? Now, it's got to be for what we call a 1983 action. 42 U.S.C. 1983 gives us a civil right of action, a civil claim against somebody who would be classified as a state actor, right? That's depriving us of our rights or privileges or immunities or equal protection under the law or such based on the color of law, some kind of statutory authority. There's going to be specific statutes regulating debt collectors, but that does have the same meaning. We're purporting to be some kind of government entity and telling you that we're going to come in and seize everything and forfeit everything, right? Because you're not paying your debt. And that has a restriction because you think you don't have any rights because you think this is somebody,
Right.
government authority telling you to do something. I think another reason why it's important to at least mention this for purposes of the LTC aspect is that, like you said, you have this badge. We talked about the badge, the LTC badge, which I don't have a problem with, but you need to be careful
That's right.
about how you utilize this product. It can be a crime, right, to make another person, right, not exercise certain rights or to falsely imprison that person or to threaten that person by making it appear such that you're some kind of government official. Okay, and so you've got to be careful about how you portray yourself, especially if you're going to have one of those badges.
Right.
But we talked about the good thing. If something goes down, the badge allows the police officer or other officials to see right on the spot, hey, this is somebody that I can count on. It's not an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so, you still have to be careful with those aspects.
Just a side note, I'm 100% in favor of those, except I'm not 100% in favor of promoting it anymore because I've seen too many people they don't have a clue. They cannot figure out and differentiate between being stupid with it and being using it as a tool, God forbid if something was to happen. So although I think it's a great concept idea, I will no longer promote it to the public. So go ahead.
Okay, well, it doesn't change the fact that if you have one of those badges, you need to be careful about how you are portraying yourself in public, because if you're acting like a government, you're going to be violating
That's right.
both state and federal laws about, right, depriving somebody of their civil rights, right, by use of a threat that was false under color of law when you really didn't have the authority to do it. You're going to have several federal statutes. Here you're going to have 18 U.S.C. 242 and 241, conspiracy to deprive people of their rights. Voting, municipalities have been sued several times successfully, right, for the way that their voting scheme is set up, right, to deny certain people of voting rights. So that can be a reason to sue for, right, the deprivation of civil rights. So those are somebody that's acting under color of law, right, but yet exceeding their authority.
Right.
Okay, if you think that you have, like, a situation where, let's say it's an unlawful search or seizure, or, right, it's a false imprisonment by some kind of official, or you feel like you're being taken advantage of, you can actually fill out a complaint form. It's a fairly easy process online with the FBI. The FBI is probably the number one agency to investigate those, what we call color of law claims. And so they're going to look into and prosecute, right, government officials, government entities, right, for things that they do that were in violation of your rights under the color of law. And really, if you still understand basically or conceptually, right, misunderstanding about the color of law, the color of anything just means under that authority. You're purporting, you're alleging, you're saying that you have this authority under this thing. You can have color of office, you can have color of title. When we talk about, I don't know if you guys know about adverse possession, when we call it the squatters rules, squatters law, squatters rights. Right? If you own 10,000 acres of property and you never go to the back corner, back 50, right, and then somebody comes in and puts a fence around it, right, and it's there for 10 years and they live there and you don't notice during that time frame, they can actually take your property. Well, there's certain aspects or several different ways to meet the adverse possession rule, and one of those rules is color of title. You can have basically a document that would be legally invalid, okay, but it's on file at the courthouse for such a time, and you're paying taxes on the property, and you're exercising rights under that title, even though under that document, even though it's invalid, right? You can claim authority to the property under that document. Now, if you meet the time frame, you'll own the property. Okay, if not, you'll be under color of title that's invalid and you get sued for trespass. Okay, so you just, it's just color means it's just an authority of something that maybe exists, but you're claiming to have the authority of that statute, that law, that authority, that legal authority is what you're claiming gives you authority to act.
Unless you're going to continue on with a specific point, I wanted to ask a question. If we brought it back to LTC on a traffic stop, and somebody who's very proficient and knowledgeable about penal codes and the laws and their rights under license to carry, yet let's say an officer does the color of law on these things and starts blurring the lines between what he can and cannot do, what can one do to clarify and say, hey, I know you're wrong. What do we do here? Do you just be obedient and get the situation resolved after the traffic stop, or is there something you can possibly do during a traffic stop that might be non-detrimental to your health?
I don't want to give any bad advice here and tell somebody to fight back against a police officer, but what I think it's always good to try to cooperate even if you feel like your rights are being violated. At some point, obviously, you need to be smart, though, even if that's true, you need to be smart about your rights. If you want to, you don't have to consent. You don't have to consent. You don't have to, right? You can revoke your consent. After you tell them that they can search at any time, you can revoke it and say, you know what? I gave you consent. You guys have looked long enough. I'm tired. I revoke it. Hereby revoke, and you guys need to get out of my car.
Do you know how weird that sounds, you saying that? I can just picture me. I don't know why I would do this and give consent, because I know I probably wouldn't. But let's say I gave it and all of a sudden I want to take it back. I can just imagine what the officer's going to say, what they would do. They say, you can't do that. I'm going to finish this up. Stand back. Do this. And then if I start arguing, it's just going to escalate to a bad situation. I just can't pick human nature, because I study human nature, I study body language, and just when you have an alpha male with an alpha male, you're going to have conflict. So I just noticed.
I think sometimes the better way is not necessarily to argue with the police officer, but to ask. You know, they're saying they're going to search you. What is your probable cause? I've always seen that really a lot of times puts officers on their heels. A good officer is probably going to say, I'm just telling you that I want to search. They're going to avoid the issue. But I think a better way to approach maybe a situation where you feel like your rights are being taken advantage of is not necessarily to say, man, that's my Fourth Amendment right. You can't do that. Right? It is as opposed to just saying, officer, what is your probable cause for going any further? What is your reasonable suspicion? Why do you want to do this? Then they're actually going to have to give you a reason that it makes somewhat sensical. Okay, and so I think that's one way to approach that situation. I think
from all the videos I've watched, from all the things I've studied and read, there is no problem out there when it comes to the law unless there comes a problem. And what I mean by that is, you've got all this law enforcement out there that are doing a fantastic job. This situation is not going to happen. But then you've got an individual who maybe wearing a badge that maybe shouldn't have been given a badge. And I think, now don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people out there too who are idiots when they get pulled over by a police officer and they act in a crazy manner. But I think, what am I trying to say? There's attitude, emotion, personalities of power trips and resistance that cause this. And it's just one of those delicate situations where we can talk about this all day long, but if you get two people with bad attitudes and personalities, no matter what you say, we're going to have conflict.
Right. Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. It's so case and fact specific. I hate to say for anybody to even ask questions, but I think there comes a certain point when you've got every right to ask a police officer, hey, what are you doing? You know, why are you doing this? Now, they may try to avoid that and still just command you to do something. I would say, you don't have a right to resist arrest in Texas, okay? And so you're going to be in trouble for resisting arrest, even if the police officer, right, didn't have a right to arrest you. Okay, and it's kind of messed up, but that's how it is. And so you need to comply, right, regardless.
See, but this is important for people to know, because they already know. We've talked about it a million times. It's always good to talk about it again, but you may know they are wrong, but arguing that point, you're not going to win. So if we understand that that's where the route's going to take us, we need to submit to a certain degree to get through it and get out of it, and then counter it later on with a person like you or something.
Now, evading arrest is not always right. If the initial stop, if the initial detention, if the initial attempt by the police officer was unlawful, right, then you technically didn't evade any lawful detention or arrest. And so, I would say that if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna break the law one way or another, it's better to evade than it is to resist. And that's just saying, don't do either one of them. But if you're gonna do one of the two, certainly you want to evade rather than resist the police officer, because then you're gonna be charged with a heavy felony, probably of some kind of assault on a police officer during the execution of his duties. Is going to be an enhancement regardless of how the assault is classified. Mm-hmm. Simply because it's a police officer, right? And then you have deadly weapons involved. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when somebody gets into a fight with a police officer, there's resisting, they're going to throw in there, just for good measure, just for good leverage, they're going to throw in there that you were attempting to take the weapon or attempting to, handle some kind of deadly weapon, and they're going to throw a deadly weapon enhancement in there. And before you know it, you got somebody that's never been in trouble that just got out of hand, and like you said, you had two people with tempers, and neither one of them acted reasonably, mm-hmm. probably. And instead of both of them getting in trouble, you've got one getting in trouble, with a high degree felony. But also know this, that even if you're being arrested, you could still have, even if you're guilty of the offense, if the police officer exceeded, he used more force than was reasonably necessary under the circumstances, we talk about this, based on force. You're going to be able to probably sue them under Section 1983, under the 8th Amendment, mm-hmm. under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Notice he said, use the law to do it. Don't counter it while it's happening. You'll get screwed.
Yeah, but let's assume that you got arrested, and it was otherwise it was a valid arrest. You did it. You had marijuana right in plain view. You're smoking a joint. You're like, man, yeah, I got it right here. And some police officer having a bad day comes up, starts tasing you. Okay, I think that
don't tase me, bro.
Yeah, I think that would be unnecessary. I think it'd be unreasonable. It'd be like breaking the security plane of the bus a while ago. Anyway,
yeah, that's right.
Inside joke. So bad joke. But in that situation, you would be able to sue for the police officer acting under the color of law, but exceeding his authority by acting unreasonably, by acting using excessive force against you. Okay, and so you do have these avenues for some kind of relief, but the reality is, what jury's going to give you money when you're a dope smoker?
Okay, look, follow me up on this. Back me up if you can. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make something very clear. I support law enforcement tremendously. I think they're fantastic. When we talk like this on the radio, it has to go back to my license to carry classes. I teach license to carry, and I'm very proficient and good at it. And it's because I study it. It's my job to study it, to teach everybody to the best of my ability to do so. And in the course of my teachings to many thousands of students, I've come across a constant thread, and that is the follow-through with their training. They do not follow through. It used to be a 10-hour class. Now it's like a 4.5-hour class for classroom training, another hour for shooting, and that's it. They're so happy. Some people just want to go to a different state to get the license so they don't have to go through classroom work at all. I get people calling me up asking me, can I qualify them on the range because they took an online course? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I want to see you face to face and know who you are. So when Ross and I, or Rick and I, or special guests come in and we discuss these matters of law and the tentacles of the law. So you got this octopus in the head is the main penal code, but there's all these tentacles that stick out that can give you colors of law or variances of law on how you respond to it, how you don't respond to it, and all that. And so if we go down the roads 10, 15, 20 steps, we get to see that a lot of the times these roads we go down thinking we're right can screw us in the end. That's why I'm always promoting, be respectful. If you don't like the person, respect the badge. Just like if you people out there don't like Trump, don't respect Trump. Respect the office of the presidency, okay? Same thing with wearing a badge. Same thing with the teacher. Respect the position of the position they hold. And this way, if you have a problem with it, then go through the proper channels to get it correct. I just want to make that clear as to why I harp on it. I'm not ignorant to what we're discussing. I am, on the contrary, very informed of these subjects and know and realize, because those of you who don't do what I do can be in for a big surprise if you don't learn more about the laws. Would that be a concur or a commentary or a critique?
Right, and look, so the reason I use a lot of police and examples is because it's easier for people to relate to on an everyday
Yeah, I get
day
that.
basis. But you should really sometimes think about these rules, because these can be used to keep government in check, right? In several different ways. Like I said, with the municipalities and the voting, with government officials who are overzealous and maybe going after other government officials, or it can even be done in such a way when the government officials know they should act in a certain situation. Okay, then if they don't act, right, a lot of times you can use these rules, right, to hold them accountable. A lot of times, and I mean, this could be with anything, with documents that statutes give people rights to have, like crash reports and other certain property records that government is supposed to file, but they don't, and maybe it causes a loss of certain property, right? If some kind of a government entity has a routine practice, or they routinely do something that denies somebody the ability to, under the First Amendment, petition a court or redress, petition the government, any kind of entity for a remedy to fix some kind of injury that they've been caused. If it prohibits somebody from marching down Main Street on a parade, right? A lot of times you can use these statutes to keep government in check, to allow you to exercise your First Amendment rights. So anytime that you think you're being treated unfairly, definitely at least take, if it's worth it to you. You know, a lot of these cases, you know, you got to assess your damages. What are your damages? But a lot of times you can get your attorney's fees paid for, even though most of them are discretionary with the courts. But if you bring a good enough case and it's worthy enough, especially on a constitutional right, you should really think about, right, looking into it a little bit further. Maybe call an attorney, maybe do some Google searches first, maybe assess the facts. Is there any other kind of exhaustion requirement? In other words, is there any other kind of remedy that I can get that is feasible, right? Is there another avenue that I can go to get the same relief, right? And if there's not, right, it makes your claim that much more viable. And so it's not just in the criminal aspect. We're talking there's so many of these cases that are brought based on civil violations. And like we talked about, probably most of them are civil violations, because who's going to sue the government for damages when they're a criminal? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. A lot of times, there's a famous case out there.
It's only in California, I think.
Well, there's a famous case out there where a man had time to serve in jail, and he was supposed to get let out, and he was crippled, right? He didn't have any legs, and he was a war veteran, and the sheriff just forgot about him and left him in there for 100 days. Now the guy was homeless, didn't have a job, and didn't have any way to make money. So you feel like, and he didn't have a halfway house to go stay at, and so you feel like, well, that was good, right? He had a bed and
3 hots and a cot.
and 3 hots and a cot, and so you think, well, that's good for him. Well, so the jury came back with 0 damages. So he sues the sheriff because they withheld him. It was false imprisonment, and the jury comes back with 0 damages. They said he didn't have any damages because it did him a favor by staying in there. Goes all the way up to the Supreme Court of Texas, and the Supreme Court says, no, any loss of liberty is entitled to at least something. It was at least $1, right? And so they made him go back and do the case, because that just shows you. It doesn't downplay liberty is only worth $1. It says that at the very minimum, right, your liberty is worth something.
Yeah.
And so the right to exercise freely your rights, right, is worth something. And so you should definitely consider. I was going to point out before we go, there was an amendment in 2017, failure to comply with immigration detainer requests. This was a big, some debate went on about this. Sheriffs, constables, somebody that's in charge of administration of the jail, right, must comply, right, with a detainer request for an illegal immigrant. They a foreign national, okay, and they must comply with this. If they don't, right, they're going to be in trouble. It's a crime. And I point this out because it's under Chapter 39, which is basically all of the kind of abuse of office and abuse of power. And the last one I want to point out is the official oppression statute, right? And take use of this statute. It could come in handy, right, when you feel like a government official has exceeded his authority, and it actually says a public servant acting under color of his office or employment, which, like we said, color of law, color of office. He's using his office as a way to intentionally subject another to mistreatment, right? You know, and cause them deprivation of their rights based on their rights.
Yep.
Okay, and so all of these things can be tools for you to use to keep your government in check. Even the fact, right, of public opinion, putting this out. Hey, why when this public official did this, why was this not an abuse of office? Even putting that right out there in a public forum, right, may be enough to make the government official go, whoa, I need to check myself.
I guess a big storm brewing here if I don't. You know?
Okay, so right, just keep in mind, I'm glad we talked about it. I would like Rick to be here to go over specific color of law issues and tort reform, the Texas Tort Claims Act, and ways to go after the government, especially in the context of you know, medical malpractice, things to that nature, because it's so difficult to launch a claim against government based on them claiming that they have immunity from suit. So I do encourage you, if you have one of those things, Rick will talk to you for 3 hours about
Sure
Texas Tort Reform and Texas Tort Claims Act and your ability to sue and not sue and be sued.
All right, everybody. This is a long, not really a long topic, but I meant was a in and out type of conversation. So if you want to recap it, review it, I'm going to have it posted probably on Tuesday, and you can listen to it a few minutes, pause it, rerun it, check it out, understand exactly what's being said here, so you have a clear understanding of it. Ross, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you.
You can holler at me here in Cameron at the office at 105 East Main Street in Cameron, or if you want to set up an appointment in Brazos County or Harris County, you can call me at 254-605-4140. That's 254-605-4140. We get questions all the time. We love questions to expand on the topic and matters of the show. Please email me if you want to talk to me directly at benton@watson.legal. That's benton@watson.legal. Just make sure you leave your phone number.
That's right. Very important for the phone number. Sometimes you can't answer all the emails. You can call you quicker and get more clarification on the question. Okay. Also, I want to thank Copley & Dodd Krebs Law Firm. Rick Dodd, thank you very much for sponsoring this segment. It's a great segment. Everybody makes lots of comments on it about how favorable it is. All right, Ross, it's always a pleasure to have you on here. Luke, let's take us out for a break, and when we come back, we're going to have delicious Janae Goodman talking about Thanksgiving dinner leftovers and what you can do with them. See you on the other side.